Okay, so by my watch, it's almost 5:03. We'll get started here. Welcome to 50green.com. This is our extension of the green building sessions, and we have a special webinar tonight on Earthships, which I'm very excited about. I just recently visited the Greater Earth community in Taos, New Mexico, and stayed there for a couple nights in an Earthship. Lots of interesting ideas, and I'm curious what everyone will think of Earthships. But first, tonight we're going to have a pop quiz, so take out a piece of paper if you have one handy. This is going to take 30 seconds. And you won't even be graded on it. So if you have a clean piece of paper, what I would like you to do, and this is a super quick exercise, in 30 seconds or less, I would like you to draw a picture of the house. Anything goes, and we're going to start timing right now. Da na 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 da da na 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 na. 15 more seconds to go. Okay, and that will wrap it up. So I'm curious, I've done this exercise in a couple of my talks, and my interest is, in a big talk, I like to have everybody pass these up here and collect them and do some statistics on them. But my question is, or my interest is in what kind of a house did you draw? Did you draw something like this? I'd say 95% of people draw this house, or some variation of this house with the sun, happy sun streaming down on the house, a little tree maybe, and a gable roof. Maybe you've got the smoke popping out, so you've got the solar energy, the fire inside, keep you warm, window and a door, something like that. Anybody draw a Casa Verde style shed roof house? Maybe with a bunch of solar panels up top. Anybody draw a flat roof house? And finally, did anybody draw a house that looks like this? Because this is an Earthship. As a custom home builder, the majority of the homes that I've built have always been quote-unquote traditional styles, or in California we see a lot of a quote-unquote Spanish style or craftsman home. In New England it's some type of a cape or salt box or shingled house, or a Victorian type of style. And when you're thinking about green, I've always said, and my attempt with Casa Verde was to build a house both using the typical kinds of materials that are available and permittable in my area in California, where there are lots of trained people who are able to build that, but also to create a building that was in response to its environment rather than trying to adapt a particular style to an environment. And I've got to say, Earthships accomplished this more than any style of building I've ever seen before. And Michael Reynolds, who's the leader, the architect, and the head guy for Earthships for over, I think, 40 years, very interesting character, came up with this model, and this is what we're going to examine today. And he totally addresses the idea of a living quarter from a home that's independent, stands on its own, creates its own energy. We're going to go into some of the details of it, but doesn't address any particular style. It addresses the environment. And hence, we bring you the Earthships. And I've titled this Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Earthships But Were Afraid to Ask. And I came up with this. There used to be a sex book when I was a young teenager called Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex But Were Afraid to Ask. And I remember looking at that book in fascination. I don't know where I got it. I'm not sure my parents knew that I had it, or maybe they even gave it to me as sex education. But it was kind of a book that was very on the edge in its time, and so are Earthships. And I think when I visited the greater Earth community, it's a little bit intimidating. I mean, they are totally, they obviously are, unless you live in Taos, New Mexico, or in a very unique place, you've probably never seen one of these before. And I showed them to I told my wife this is going to be our next house, or at least a modern version of an Earthship that I can permit and build in California. And she was horrified. You know, she just couldn't relate. First of all, she likes straight lines. And as you'll see, the Earthship is anything but straight. So, again, I titled it Everything You Wanted to Know But Were Afraid to Ask. It's a little weird. It's a little hippie-ish. It's a little futuristic, whatever you want to call it. But come with me on this journey through the Earthship, and we'll discuss at the end what we can learn. And I'm curious about any of your reactions, your thoughts, your comments about Earthships. Again, as you know, you can reach us at 50green50.com. I'm sorry, 50green50 at gmail.com, which I'm sure you all know by now. $50green50 at gmail.com. So send in your comments. I'd love to hear from you on this in particular. So this is the north side, the entrance to what's called the Happy Castle. And this is in the greater Earthship community, which is outside Taos. Excuse me. This is in the greater Earthship community, which is outside Taos. This is about a, I think, 500 to 600 acre piece of land that Michael Reynolds bought to develop Earthships, and it's actually a gravel pit. So they've reclaimed the land, and you'll actually see some pictures of houses that are in the gravel pit. So that in itself is a major green piece of this puzzle. He's taking land which was used industrially and treated as wasteland and turned it into a viable community. I think there are about 50 Earthships there right now, and lots of lots for sale. Also, this is probably about 10-12 miles outside west of Taos, and you can see it right from the. Actually, it's interesting if you're driving from the north, as I was. It's very hard to see because you see the backs of these buildings, and this is the earth berm that you can see here. Again, this particular model has this entryway on the north side, but everything else faces south because that's where the greenhouse and the solar gain comes from, obviously, and the north side is protected and builds up the mass around the building. But as I said, this is the doorway to what's called the Happy Castle Earthship, and it's currently for sale for $399,000. And there are, actually, like everywhere else in the United States today, there are lots of Earthships for sale, and they range from $40,000 to $1.5 million. You'll see there's quite a variety of buildings in this area. So I went up here just a couple of weekends ago, and I actually stayed in one of their houses, which I'll show you. Visited they have a terrific visitor center where they are educating people about Earthships. It's a self-guided tour. They have lots of materials, and I'll explain some of the materials that you can get and make some suggestions for some of the materials that you might want to pick up for further study. And they also have just built or just completing a new educational center. They do a lot of internships and lectures, and you can go up there and learn how to build an Earthship. So if you're ever in the area, I highly suggest that you go check it out. It's a lot of fun. Stay in one of their Earthships. All right, so a little overview of tonight's talk. We're going to talk a little intro as we've just gone through. Then I'm going to take you on a tour of mostly the greater Earthship community outside of Taos. Then we're going to go through a sort of interactive whiteboard Earthship construction review. I'll show you how these things are actually built. And I think we're going to break about here tonight. And the following webinar, we're going to go in detail through the 6 pillars of Earthship design. And we'll discuss what we can learn, how we can apply it to green buildings that we might build in our areas. And then I'll talk to you about resources, about the books, and more information that you can get. There's lots of information, and it's well worth looking at. Okay, so this Earthship here is called the Phoenix. It's absolutely gorgeous. At least I think it's gorgeous. It's one of the. It's actually for sale. It's on the market for $1.5 million. I believe this is sort of a grand dame experiment that Michael Reynolds did. I'm not entirely sure about this. I'm just guessing, but I believe he built this to sell it, or I'm guessing that, as sort of a state-of-the-art example of an Earthship. And not all of them are quite this intricate, but you can see I've got a copy of the floor plan here. This one here is quite large. I want to say it's 5,000 square feet. It is has sort of a double greenhouse, and you can see sort of this sculptural phoenix here rising out of the desert. Now I wanted to say I first heard about Earthships in probably the early 90s when I went to I was in Colorado, actually in Durango, in a coffee shop, and I saw a little sticker for a natural home building seminar that was going on in Rico, Colorado, which is a tiny mining community up in the mountains behind Telluride. And it looked interesting. I ended up going, was there for a week. We built straw bale, we built earth bag houses, we did some Earthship tire pounding, earth floors, solar, septic systems, a bunch of really interesting information, and also hands-on earth plastering. We did a lot of building, and it was a lot of fun. And I came back to Los Angeles and haven't used that stuff, or really can't use that stuff in Los Angeles, and still can't. But there's a lot of interesting techniques, and a lot of these things over the years I think have applied and brought into more standard building types. And we'll talk about that more. Michael Reynolds. So anyway, when I was at that natural home building thing, there was a lot of talk about Earthships, and I think these guys had learned a lot from Michael Reynolds, because they seem to be using a lot of the same things. I'm not sure what the connection was, but at that time, Michael Reynolds had received a commission to build a Earthship for Dennis Weaver. And if anybody remembers him, he was a cowboy in Gunsmoke, and then he had a TV show, I think it was called McCabe or something like that, McCabe and Mrs. Miller. I forget what the one was, but he was a pretty famous TV star, movie star. And he bought a piece of land in Ridgeway, Colorado, and they ended up building him a 10,000 square foot Earthship. And Michael Reynolds got a lot of publicity from this Earthship. I think it sort of went against his grain a little bit as a Earthship being self-contained and green and sort of a survival unit built to a luxury standard. I don't think was totally his bag, but it became such a unique piece that he got a lot of PR, and I think that's helped him in his quest. So, as I said, we're going to get into the 6 pillars of Earthships in detail, and this isn't Michael Reynolds' nomenclature. It's mine. I kind of like the idea of pillars of the earth, pillars that hold up a building. But think about these concepts. Number one, the idea is, and I have to say, Michael Reynolds would call the green building that I do probably a green veneer, because it's a long distance from where he is and what his buildings are, but then again, he can't build his buildings where I build my buildings. And in some respects, he's right about the green veneer. So think about, number one, using salvage and recycled materials. And with the Earthships, it's tires is a big part of it. Using old tires to build walls. Number two, Earthships create their own energy through solar panels, wind power. I think they've even experimented with biodiesel. Earthships capture their own rainwater for fresh water, and they end up using water 4 times, unlike a typical home that's attached to a city water where we use fresh water once and then send it down in the sewer. Earthships also heat and cool themselves passively and largely through the help of the thermal mass of the buildings. Earthships treat their own wastewater, and they actually grow their own food as well. And this is something we don't talk about, or I haven't talked a lot about, but we're going to get into a bit more, having a garden, growing your own food, because that's also a significant part of the green movement. Okay, so here is the Phoenix. So I'll go back a couple. There's the Phoenix picture that you just saw. And this, again, is right off of Route 64, north of Taos, New Mexico. And look at the floor plan here. So first thing, it may be a little hard to read. He does a lot of Michael Reynolds is definitely both an artist and a engineer. And you've probably heard me talk about the definition of architecture being both. The creative side is very much left brain, right brain. Some architects are definitely more the artist types, and others are more the engineer types. But it's the art and the science of creating a building, and he does both. So here's the science here. This building is built into the earth. This is the north side here. Built into an earth berm. You've got water cisterns on both sides. That's what those blue boxes are. So you've got a big, huge earth dam insulating this house. On the south side, you have all this glass for the solar greenhouse. And this one is very unique. He's actually got an indoor lawn here. And remember, this is not your typical Earthship. This is a very large one, but I thought an interesting one just to kick off our discussion. And this particular Earthship has 2 greenhouse separations. So you have the exterior one, and then you have another interior one that comes through here. And what that does is it helps even more regulate the temperature between the exterior and the interior. And we talked about, I had a question from somebody on the website about, can I build a passive solar building in Canada? And my answer was yes. If you shelter it with greenhouses or make a couple rows of greenhouses, absolutely. Particularly if you could build an Earthship in northern Canada. So in this area where the two greenhouses are, that's a food production area. He's also got this entire exterior area here for food production. This is outside. He has in this particular Earthship a tilapia pond here where they can actually grow and capture and eat their own fish. So they can pick their vegetables, get their protein from the fish out of the tilapia pond. You can see the entire building is not too deep so that it gets light and heat from the outside. These are the tire walls, and in this case we have sort of U-shapes. We're going to discuss the different plans, but you have a couple of U-shaped buildings sort of within this bigger, deeper building. And then in this particular one, each one has an outside, each bedroom here has an outside area, a little indoor-outdoor terrace. But I've seen some pictures of this. It's fabulous. I mean, I think then he's got quite a bit of planting on the interior as well. It sort of feels like you're living outside. Okay, so let's start the tour. This is it, the Greater World Earthship Community, just outside Taos. These mountains here are the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. They run north-south on it is the easternmost mountain range. I think there are several 13,000 footer peaks in this area, and the Taos ski area is, I'm not sure if it's 13,000, but it's close to it. I actually skied there, geez, probably 30 years ago, and it was an excellent ski area. But this, you can see actually here in the distance, there are still some, I think this is, there's some industrial uses going on. I think this is bermed up from another factory type thing. But he's got this whole big area here, about 600 acres, as I said, where they're building their Earthships. Now, one of the interesting things in Taos, when I was there were thunder. In August, they call it the monsoon season. Every afternoon, you get the moisture coming up from the south and creating these beautiful, huge cumulus clouds, which quite often drop rain, which is important for the Earthship because it replenishes the water cisterns. Unlike the area where I live in Ojai, California, we get rain in sometime between November and February, usually in large storms a couple times, only a few times a year, and then it doesn't rain for up to a year. So for us, it's very hard to capture water on a regular basis. But you'll see this is looking over the back of an Earthship, actually the one that I stayed in, the studio. This is the chimney for the fireplace. You see lots of rounded shapes, plastered shapes. They use a lot of natural plaster. This is the chimney cap. That's built out of sheet metal in the same rounded fashion. It's very organic looking. And I wanted to show you just quickly some of the other types of housing that's in the area. Maybe we could think what might be more sustainable and green. Trailers. You see a lot of trailers throughout the West. They seem to be everywhere, and I guess there's no master zoning plan for the Great Wide West. Some people might not want to have trailers in their neighborhood. There are no trailers in the Earthship community. And I think this is obviously one end, the very low end of the spectrum in terms of a comfortable home to live in. You can see they all have their air conditioning units on the top. These things are typically built with 2x4s, very little insulation, particularly the older ones. I can see right here these have the slider aluminum windows, probably single glaze. At least the roofs are painted light colors, so it reflects the sun. But not particularly a sustainable or green solution in my opinion. You also see the indigenous type of housing, which is adobe, and this goes back 1,000 years. Mud bricks. We have this out in California. The Spanish came to this area in the 1500s, and the Native Americans in the area had already been living there 500-600 years. Actually, the Anasazi, which is not too far from here, I think they say they go back 2,000 years. But these buildings are made of mud bricks, and they're very thick walls. You can see, actually, this is a 2-story building, and you can see the thickness. It's almost 2 feet thick of the mud floor, and these are the vigas here. And I'm showing you this because there's some of this technology is actually used in the Earthship. You can see the vigas up on top that hold up the roof. And here's actually a picture of the Taos Pueblo, which is, this building is over 1,000 years old, and people have been living in it for over 1,000 years. Apparently, the walls on the bottom of this structure are almost 4 feet thick. And you can see originally they had very tiny windows, if any at all. So the thickness of these walls insulated them from the extreme outdoor temperatures, which in this area can go anywhere from 100, 110, or 20 degrees in the hot summer sun to 30 below zero in the winter. So extreme temperatures both ways. High desert community. And the Rio Grande cuts right through this part of Taos. As a matter of fact, or this part of New Mexico. Taos is this way, and the Earthship community is this way, only about 5 or 6 miles. This is Route 64. And I couldn't help but take a picture of this bridge because of the engineering marvel that it is. It actually is, I believe, the 5th highest bridge. It's some 650 feet above the gorge below. And it is a steel frame suspension bridge. I think that not suspension. Suspension would be a bridge that's supported from above. Actually, I looked this up and I don't have my notes here. This is what they call a post and beam. So this is the post and this is the beam. But in this case, the beam here is created by this triangulated, lightweight, relatively steel. And there you can see the Rio Grande down there below. And this bridge is something. You can see here there's a little parking lot where people are selling all kinds of weird stuff, and it's a big tourist area, obviously. But this, you can walk right across this, and these railings are about 40 inches high. If you wanted to end it all, you could easily jump right off the side of that bridge in grand fashion. But back to the Earthships, and that's all the background we're going to do. It's hard to take a bad picture of these Earthships, at least a finished Earthship. I thought they're spectacularly creative and sort of Gaudi-esque, if you're familiar with the Barcelonan architect who's so famous. If you're not, look him up on Google him, Gaudi in Barcelona, and you'll see some amazing chapels and buildings that he built. He didn't believe in straight lines at all. Everything is curvy and organic and moves around. But you can see here the organic shapes, and some of this is based off the tire walls that they have the nice curves. This obelisk or pinnacle, whatever you want to call it, here actually has these are all bottles that are put in here, and then they plaster up to it. We're going to show you lots more pictures of their bottles. They have some beautiful, what he does is take trash, the cans and bottles from the waste of America, and uses them as building parts. Now this is a really cool one. Most of the Earthships that you see in this community have sort of colors of the desert, the reds, the sage greens, there's some brown, some of the clayish colors, which I love. They're all sort of natural hues, also the same types of hues. If you were to tint your concrete, they use a lot of these sort of natural tints because that's what they are, natural tinting colors. And you can see that you see a lot of dome type structures and we'll get into their domes. Sometimes these are cisterns, sometimes these are parts of the room. If you looked at the floor plan of this building, it may have a sort of a circular room here attached to a more rectangular shape. But once again, you start to see some of the parts and pieces here. Here's a wind generator. They use a lot of these small scale wind generators, and I know Michael Reynolds has also experimented with some larger generators and had some success with his homemade ones, and I'm not sure that he's totally enthusiastic about these smaller ones, but we'll find out more about these small scale wind generators and do another webinar on it. But again, you can see the southern exposure, all the glazing on the south side for the solar greenhouse. Being the summer, a lot of people have insulating curtains or shades to keep solar gain from entering the house during the hot months. This house actually has 2 domes. I can see another one back here. Looks like 2 chimneys. This is their solar hot water system right here, and actually even 2 separate buildings kind of stuck together, it looks like. This one is kind of a distant shot looking at another part of the you can see this roadway here comes through the greater Earthship community, and this particular Earthship over here has landscape walls, if you want to call them that, built all the way around sort of their particular space, and these are all tire walls, and you can see their color. They've chosen that very natural brownish clayish color from the soils that are there. Another Earthship here. You can see how well it's tucked into the ground, and another Earthship here. As I said, when I was coming from the north, which is this direction, you can barely see the Earthships. You just see these little chimneys and sun skylights and so forth sticking up above the ground. And this is not a, this is sort of a rolling mesa. As I said, it was a gravel pit, so it's not hospitable by most means area to build your house. You can see, look at the trees here. So these are all grown from the water created and stored from the Earthships, because you can see that's not natural in this environment here. So they're creating their own environment. Earthships go from little tiny buildings to great big buildings. I showed you the Phoenix. This one here, I believe it's called the Nautilus, and this is a very large 2-story building, which is kind of unusual because you don't typically see these buildings coming up and out of the ground like that. And I don't know too much about the Nautilus, except I know they have some big spaces, and it was some of the people who work at the Earthship community live in this one. You can see they've got all kinds of stuff going on here with greenhouse areas and very unique sort of detailing in the plaster work. This one even has a pyramid-shaped skylight on the top. Here's another Earthship, and one of the things that you see here is various degrees of completion of some of these buildings. Many of these buildings are built with the owners actually doing the construction, and like any good contractor building, it's probably never, a lot of them are never finished. There are a lot of guys out there who work as builders in the area, and the old joke about a contractor's home is it's the last one to get built, right? I can tell you that from experience on past projects. But this one here also has sort of a 2-story element. It could also be built into the hill, or this could be sort of an atrium type of space. This is a example of one of the lesser completed buildings. You can see here, this is the actual tire wall structure. He's got some solar glazing here, and I'm not quite sure what the story is with this one. Obviously he hasn't finished his stucco, and he's got sort of a 2-story rectangular, almost looks like a conventional type building here. As I said, some people are building these in their spare time with their own money, and others are having them built for them by some of the crews that the Earthship Biotech or Michael Reynolds business actually can provide. And they travel all over the world building Earthships. Another example, you can see here several things going on in this one. It has a lot of glazing. In this particular area, the optimal angle for the solar glazing is 60 degrees. You can see this one here is tilted back, whereas this is vertical. You get a little different effect out of that angle in the glazing because that allows the sun to come directly into the building. And that's based on the low sun angle in the Taos, because of the Taos area latitude, which I think is 47 or something like that. Here is an example of solar panels, and this is on a column that actually is supposed to articulate. It moves, it tracks the sun. You can see a little wind generator, and you can also see some sort of an antenna. These Earthships have all the comforts of home in them. They've got internet, TV if you want it, hot and cold showers. Here's a solar hot water heater that's being used. They are very comfortable. These are two separate Earthships, and this one here is called the Global Plan. We'll talk a little bit about the plans, but they have everything. They've developed these over the years from what they called everything from sort of huts or small round buildings to U-shaped buildings to rectangular buildings. And this plan here is one of the newer types, and you can see these are quite clean and quite completed. You see the solar panels up here, no longer articulating, but they can actually hinge these and raise them up for a more optimum summertime angle if necessary, but they're all set here on that 60-degree angle, as well as these greenhouses. There's a different kind of solar hot water panel. That's actually similar to what I used on Casa Verde. Another unique thing about the Global Plan is the double greenhouse. So you can see, if you look in here, you can see a second layer of glass behind there. And that's very effective in terms of controlling your environment on the inside. So you can have almost a hothouse greenhouse kind of thing for growing your food and your plants and creating your heat. But you can also insulate it in the summer months and control the temperature of the innermost part of the living space a lot better with a double greenhouse. And you can see here, this one is much less crude, to use to not think of a better word, but this actually has Velux style windows here, which are operable, so that helps control that temperature in the double greenhouse. These skylights here are a design which I'll show you more of that they've come up with, that actually no longer has glass on the top because they found out they were getting too much solar gain and they didn't need the glass, but it does help with the ventilation. And there's a convection loop. You can allow the air to come in and it'll naturally vent out on the top. Also much like what we did in Casa Verde. But the global plan is very interesting, and you can get a little global plan sheet from the Earthship people if you want to find out more about it. Okay, so here is another floor plan from Earthship Biotexture, and this is for the global plan. You can see you've got the double greenhouse. There's the outside row, there's the inside row, there's all your planter area, which is also where you treat your gray water. It's quite a simple floor plan. You can see it's rectangular in shape. It's not very deep, so light penetrates in here, as well as heating the mass through the greenhouse. He's also added these tubes which come in through the back and actually cool the air by going through the berm that's in the back. These houses are bermed in. You can see the water cisterns are buried in there. 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, kitchen area, another bedroom, and you can build these in many shapes. You can build them in sort of a studio form, which might be half this size, or you can link two together. Michael's done a great job in terms of looking at this plan in every possible way that you can imagine over his 40-year career with Earthships. And then this little Earthship here, I believe it's called the packaged plan, which is one of their earlier attempts, or one of their earlier Earthships that they would provide plans for and you could build yourself. It's fairly simple. You can see Here the glass is vertical, not angled, which is actually easier to build. You can see they deal with their overhang. Here this is the hot summer, so it's probably late in the afternoon. During the heat of the day, that shadow would be cast all the way down to the bottom. Obviously, you can see how it's bermed into the earth. And these are the tire retaining walls. You can see actually the little they plaster as they step back. Look at it on this side as well. And this looks like a fairly small one, but this one actually is not in the greater Earthship community. This was closer to Taos, amongst more conventional houses. And in his career with Earthships, Michael Reynolds has had all kinds of battles to try to get the local building codes to allow his buildings to be built. So I was interested to see one built outside of the community. But there are many communities that they've built. This is one called Reach, which is up in the mountains. I believe it's at 8,000 or 9,000 feet up. And there's an interesting story that you can get more out of some of Michael's videos, but they built this one. I believe he got some sort of permission from the local authorities, and then the guy who gave him permission died, and then the local community or the local building officials sort of took permission back and said, hey, you can't do this stuff anymore. At any rate, it exists. It's a private community, and it is successful. He proved that not only can he build these in the flats, but he can build these up in the mountains, and they can still work. They can still create their own energy, collect their own water, and work as independent buildings. Now these buildings, all these buildings that you're looking at, are completely off the grid. There is no water or power supplied at the greater Earthship community. The quote-unquote subdivision there, it doesn't have sewers in it. You know, like a subdivision here in California, a cookie-cutter subdivision where you see these lots, they take a giant chunk of land and they build a road in there, and then they build roads off of that with cul-de-sacs, and then you have a house lot here, 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 and it repeats itself. You have another road that comes off of that road, and there's cul-de-sacs, and it just repeats and repeats and repeats. Well, in every one of these subdivisions, and they're all over America, when they grade them out, first thing you have to do is you have to put in all your utilities. You have to put in all your sewers, which crisscross throughout here and connect to whatever the municipal sewer system is. Probably they also put either underground power if it's a more advanced one, or overhead power. You got to wire your cable TV in, your telephone lines, and your power, your electric power. So you've got this grid of all kinds of stuff that goes into these developments even before all these little roadways and house lots are built. So when you see those barren land, that's what they call an quote-unquote improved lot. Well, in these communities, that ain't improved in the usual sense of the word, but it's improved by an Earthship. As you're traveling around, and the visitor center and the education center are sort of works in process. I think they have a lot of interns there, and I think they probably pick projects and build a little bit as you go. But you see all sorts of unfinished products or unfinished projects, and that's probably part of the reason he does the internships, and it's also helps with your education when you go and visit there. But this is a can wall. You can see there's all aluminum cans, and what they do, I think one of Michael Reynolds' earliest ideas after he got out of architecture school was to create a can building. And I believe he got written up in one of the trade magazines for architects. I can't remember the name. It's not Architectural Digest. It was the Architects. It was the one for architects. Anyway, I'm forgetting the name. But he came up with this concept where you would take beer cans or soda cans, and you would sandwich them together in sort of a six-pack. You'd have two horizontal, two vertical, or two vertical, two horizontal, and two more vertical. So if you looked at this in plane, you'd see a second one here, and then these kind of go out here. I'm not drawing this very well. And then these were bundled up. These cans went sideways. These were bundled up with wire, and it created sort of a brick, kind of a, I don't know, 6-pack size brick. And he built a whole house out of these 6-packs stacked up with cans. And I think he only did it once, but he has continued to use cans as a way to build concrete walls. And these are the filler. So you take these cans, you actually crush the middle of them, and you use them as filler for a mortar wall. We'll show you more of that too. But it's very unique, and sometimes they will plaster right up to the edge of the wall, right up to the edge of the can, so that all you see is sort of this concave aluminum thing, and it becomes quite pretty. But this is in a little tower building, and you can see they obviously put windows in this tower. This is an example of some of the earthen plaster that they use. You can see the little pieces of straw that are built in there. There's a clay and sand natural plaster, which sometimes is painted, sometimes it's left natural, sometimes it's sealed with linseed oil. But again, he's not only using waste products to build these buildings, and lots of glass bottles. And I took tons of shots of these glass bottles in the walls because I thought they're so beautiful. What they do here, you can see this one is actually finished plaster, I believe. They plaster right up to the edge of these bottles, much like they do to the cans, but because the bottles go all the way through the wall, it obviously lets sunlight through, and he's taken the trash and made beautiful stained glass walls. And this is one of the trademarks of his construction. You see this all over the place. But what they do is they take a bottle. All right, a bottle's shaped something. All right, a bottle's shaped something like this, right? It has a neck on it. And they will put it in a tile saw, and they'll cut off the neck. So you have, they used to make wine glasses like this out of wine bottles. You cut off the neck and make a nice wine glass. But you have two of these facing each other, about a foot thick, and then you mortar in between them, and you create this wall that's built out of glass bottles. I really like the blue color, but you can see this one here is this is what we would call in stucco more the scratch or the brown coat. So they're layering the mortar in there, and then as they start to finish this, they bring out the stucco or the plaster with a rough coat, and then they fill it with an earthen plaster or whatever their finish type of plaster is. Kind of reminds me of, I always loved the light when I was a kid in New York City. My grandmother lived in New York City, and would go into the churches, and they have incredible stained glass in some of the beautiful old churches in New York City. And I never was much for the church services themselves, but I certainly liked looking up at the cool light coming through, particularly the blues. Again, here's a little bit more of a rougher example, actually with cans. You can see that's a Pepsi can. So this wall has a combination of cans and bottles, and they obviously put them in particular patterns depending on what their artistic creation requires. This is inside a very dark room, some pretty green bottles. And another one, when you start seeing some of the piles of trash, you start recognizing the different kind of bottles. If you are a sea glass collector, you know that the blue glasses are some of the most rare and cherished colors. And I'm not quite sure where these blue bottles come from, but they're very pretty. And these are a light blue square bottle. And there you can see this is an exterior wall that they built. It's a concrete wall with the fill of the glass, and you've got aluminum cans up on the top, and then obviously your layers of different bottles in different colors. And you can see the nice patterns they've come up with the blues around here, and kind of like little jewels. and this one here is framed out. Call that some sort of modified arch. So this here is an interior shot of actually the studio that I stayed in. And again, you can see the glass with the finished plaster here, which is actually painted. You can see they use a lot of the greens. This is obviously a green wash, a green kind of stain on these rough plank ceilings here. Okay, so I wanted to give you a little tour of the studio that I stayed in so you can see some of the interior, and then we'll get into the construction. We're about an hour into our webinar now, so I figure we have about a half an hour to go. A little tour of the building, then we'll get into the construction. But notice a couple things here. First of all, let me give you a tour and we'll come back. So this is as you enter in, this is sort of, the studio is a sort of U-shaped small space, basically one room. Over here is the bathroom. That's the bed. You can see they have TV. Notice the skylight here, and the cables that you see here are all for the internet and I believe the cable or the satellite TV. So obviously they didn't think about that when they built it. This building I think is 15, 20 years old. So we've just gone around in a circle there. This is looking at the other side of it. This is the entrance to the studio. So you can see the solar greenhouse panels on this side. And this would be the earth berm, or the tire walls that are supporting, that are bermed into the earth on the north side. You can see the planter that's on the, just on the inside of the greenhouse right here. Back here is the, what they call the WOM, or the water organization model. And this is a self-portrait on a hot day. I'm not trying to show you my massive physique there, but sort of wanted to get a little scale, and it was hot, and I went for a run as well. But this is the outside of that unit. It's actually two units here. It's split in half. And this is the one that I stayed in. So I showed you looking this way. The bathroom is over on this side. Here's the solar hot water. You can see the solar panels up here. And you can actually see they are tilted up for the summer angle. There's the chimney for the fireplace. In the back you can see the 60-degree sloped greenhouse. And of course it's bermed into the earth, and the earth is sort of cut out in the front. This is the kitchen. So if you are looking at the outside, that would be this area where these shades are. They use, a lot of them use shades to keep the summer sun out even more than what the sun angle does, so it helps keep it a little bit cooler. But you can see the kitchen sink here, and the water, once you use it in the kitchen sink, goes into the planter to be treated as gray water, which then goes back to the toilet. So gray water is used in the toilet, unlike we typically use fresh water for the toilet, and then it's sent out to a septic system as black water. This is an example of some of the cabinetry. It's all sort of handmade cabinetry out of, some of it's kind of found parts and pieces, and obviously very artistically put together. I just want to take you back through this tour. Notice here that this is a rounded wall. I think this is the end of a tire wall, so that's one of the reasons you see these rounded shapes. And they use glass and cans and bottles to fill the tires. But notice this level here. We'll talk about this in the construction. Actually, from here down is an earthen wall, and from this point up is a tire wall. And you can see how the tire wall comes along here, pops up a level, pops up another level for the slope of the roof. And you can see here as well, here's a tire tower. So they've stacked up tires to build this section, which probably is a support for the beams that hold the front. Now I'm not sure if this is an earthen floor. Sometimes they use concrete floors, sometimes they use earthen mud floors, which are, you wouldn't know the difference actually between concrete and a clay type floor. But you can see You can see they're all very muted stains. Again, a lot of the greens. This is sort of a burlap material on the ceiling with these little vigas holding it up, which has another sort of very mottled greenish type stain. They supply you with all kinds of their videos and books when you're there. I think I watched 5 or 6 of his videos to get thoroughly educated. A lot of fun too. And by the way, when I was there, it was probably 100 degrees outside and probably 80 degrees inside the Earthship, even when it was, you know, it hadn't been tended to. In other words, it was closed up and nobody had sort of shaded the windows or opened the vents. But what you see here is a skylight in the back of the Earthship. So this Earthship is sort of U-shaped. And you have your greenhouse here on the north, would be in this direction. So your greenhouse is on the south wall. Your tire wall that's burned into the earth here would have this skylight in the back of it. And there are some openable windows or vents in the front. So when you open up this high window in the back, you get that convection flow. The hot air comes up and out. So at the end of the day, when it cools off outside, you open up your skylight, and in this case they have this rope right here, has a cleat, and it's a levered skylight. I'll show you how that works later. So you uncleat that and it naturally lifts up under power of cantilever and cantilevered weight to keep that skylight open. So the skylight lets a lot of light into the back of the Earthship, the darker part, since it's further back, and obviously you get a lot of light from the front, from the greenhouse. Again, you can see this area here where when they excavate, they're actually using the earth. So down here is all an earth wall, and up above is all tires. We'll get into that a little bit more too. Again, you can see it right here. Cuts all the way across, earth wall below, tire wall coming up above, and here's a sort of a Kiva style fireplace. And this is the entrance to the studio. So I showed you this. You can actually see a unfinished tire wall out here. These are little bottles that are stuck in there. To finish this wall and make it look like this wall, what you would do is add bottles and cans and fill this with rough mud clay filler. Then you would tack on lath on top of this and stucco over it like a stucco wall. But this is one of the reasons you get these sort of curvy forms when it's stucco, because it's over a tire wall and it steps and it rolls and moves. And you can see again, here's that earth section. Okay, I think that's enough on the studio tour. So let's take a minute here and talk about Earthship construction. And I sort of debated whether I should do this before we went through the 6 pillars of Earthships or after. And I thought this is not a in-depth detail of exactly how to go home and build an Earthship, although you could probably take some of this information and do it. But I will, as I said at the end of the next webinar, I'll give you all the resources and the books that are very insightful and very well laid out and very detailed that tell you exactly how to do it if you want to build one of these in your backyard or somewhere else. But there are a number of Earthships designs, as we've discussed. They have, and they're building these around the world, and they have different ones that are good for different sort of things. They have what they call the hut, which is literally a round plan. They have the U's, which I just showed you. The studio is sort of a U, and you can combine U's to create a larger building. They have the packaged Earthship, and this is sort of what the plans look like in rough sketch. And the packaged one is more of a rectangular shape, and you can also continue that one on to be bigger. The global is the Earthship, which has also the rectangular shapes, and it has the double greenhouse in front. And then there's I think the newest one is the International. And I'm not exactly sure how that one's different from the global, but I think they're still developing that one. But the Earthship all starts from the tire. Okay, so I haven't heard exactly how it came to Michael to pick up some tires and start smashing dirt in them, but it did. And one of his fascinating books is The Coming of the Wizards, I believe it is. And he has written and talks about his visions from wizards, and he believes that he has received a lot of information from these wizards about a number of things, and maybe the tires came from them, I don't know, but maybe it came from inspiration of the adobe buildings and the pueblos in New Mexico. But it's a fascinating concept, and one that works surprisingly well. And he would say that, he would use something else if there was something better, but he's never found anything better than a tire. So tires do lots of things. Number one, tires are a waste product in society, and a global waste product. You can go anywhere and find tires. I think I did a little research on tires, and I think in the United States we use something like, or we throw away something like 250 million tires a year. Phenomenal number. If you think about it, and we got 350 million people here. I'm not sure how many cars and trucks, but obviously we go through lots of tires. So what he did is he came up with the idea that you take a tire and you use it as a building block for a wall. And the way he does that is he takes a tire and rams earth into it. We've talked a little bit about rammed earth buildings. There's another technology called rammed bag construction, where they fill bags and stack them up like adobe blocks. We've got adobe blocks, which is an earth type construction, although that's baked, not rammed. But what you do is you literally lay the tires down and you fill the empty cavities with earth. So if this tire here is sitting on ground, what you're going to do is literally fill it up, and you don't want to do this with a sloppy wet soil. It's got to be a soil that can be compressed. But you would fill this up with earth, and then you would start taking a sledgehammer or a compactor and start ramming the earth into these tires. And he'll actually show you a technique. If you had a tire in one of his books, he shows you a technique where you fill it up and then you strike it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I think it's 9 times, and you go around the circle and then you fill it up. A brutal way of building, and I think a lot of the homeowners who help out, it's good to have a big crew, because I believe you can have up to 1,000, or depending how large your structure is, a couple thousand tires that you're stacking and ramming. And what happens is, a tire that's not mounted on a wheel and not filled with air is flimsy. If you stepped on the sidewall, it would kind of crush in. But once you ram it with earth, a couple things happen. Number one, it stretches and flattens. So this would be the rammed earth tire on this side, a little bit smaller and a little bit more elongated. And it also becomes incredibly dense. So now this tire is completely filled with soil. And if you were to stand on this, unlike the unfilled tire, which would squish down, this thing is like a concrete block. So what you end up doing is you end up filling these tires and compressing the soil in them. Then you do another one next to it. You level them off. Then your next row of tires comes up on top of that. Much like concrete block construction, you're going to interweave these tires, and you're going to compact the soil in each one of these. So what you end up with is an incredibly dense 3-foot thick wall of rubber filled earth. So think about that compared to a 2x4 building, or those spindly trailers that we looked at that are built with 2x4 studs. A 2x4 stud is 1.5 inches by 3.5 inches. So you've got that measly 3.5 inches to put your little fiberglass insulation or whatever else it is, and then your cardboard. It's no wonder when the hurricanes come, they blow these things down, compared to this thing, which is built with tires rammed with earth and then filled with earth over the back. All right, so here we go. This is a plan view of an Earthship, and this is the basic model. Again, we're not going to do every single model. I want to just use this as an example. You would have a maximum of, say, 26 feet in depth and 18 feet in width for your basic U shape. So these tires, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 deep, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide. Now this isn't totally to scale here, but the first thing you do is you come in, you lay out your tires in your plan, and then you excavate your soil in front of it. Now you take this excavation and a lot of times this is done with a backhoe because this is extremely back-breaking work, but you certainly could do it with a hoe, shovel, and wheelbarrow. You stack up the soil back here, and as you build your tire walls, you continue to take this soil and fill in the tires. Now, if we look at this in a side view, a section, or an elevation, that excavation that we were just talking about would look something like this in the middle of the tires, but on the sides you're going to cut level pads. This is much like we would do if we were building a concrete stem wall. You're going to build little level pads for the tires to sit on, because obviously you don't want your tires, if this here represents the original grade, you're not going to build your wall with your tires following that grade, because they would topple over. You want them bearing on flat soil. Okay, so as you build these up, now remember when I showed you the excavation, I'm going to erase this. When I showed you the interior wall and I said some of the wall down in the bottom part was earth and some of the wall in the upper part is tires. Well, that's the line that we looked at from the inside as it was tearing down. And this part from here to here is the earthen part. Actually from here to here. So then this wall comes back, and then you see it, that little shelf is represented by the tire wall up above it. Now when you stack tires like this, you don't come out with perfect ends, so there's a technique that they use for filler tires or filler blocks to fill in the little pieces. And that's what these darker ones represent. So what you end up doing here is you end up having an excavation. You're coming down, say, 4 feet into the earth, and then going up another 4 feet with your tire walls. And you're packing these walls up. Again, if you look at the floor plan, you've got this U shape, and then these wing walls will help with your fill that you'll come back with later. and then you'll create another wall in front of the U, which will be your foundation for your greenhouse section. We'll come back here to the side view, or the side elevation of the Earthship. As you, again, this would be the south side over here, and the north side over here. So as you build up your tire walls, you continue to backfill and compact the soil in the back. You may have a cistern in here. There are different techniques for adding insulation, but you end up building your tire walls, and then in these simpler systems, and again, they have a lot of different types of systems, but I'm just showing you one here. They used vigas, very much like the Native Americans had used vigas and sort of traditional New Mexico architecture. They use these big log beams to support the roof, and in this particular situation, they would insulate on top of that roof and make a thick roof, usually using foam. And this roof then becomes a water catchment system, because on the south side, you'll see we've got another tire wall here that is your foundation for your greenhouse. And so what happens is the greenhouse is set up so that you have this, again, 60-degree angle. And we talked about this in the green building sessions, how to figure out the solar angles for winter and summer for your particular latitude. But in Taos, New Mexico, it works out to be a 60-degree angle for these greenhouses, so that in the wintertime, when the sun is low, the sun will penetrate deep into the Earthship. And that does a couple things. Number one, it provides sun for the plants. It provides light deep into the building. Remember, we had a skylight in the back here. It also, when the summer sun is high, so we've got winter sun and we've got summer sun. What a beautiful sun. So when the summer sun is shining down, all of this back part here is in shadow. So you can see that what a great passive solar technique this is. Also, by allowing the sun's rays to penetrate in through the glass, what it does is it heats this huge mass. So remember, we've got the 3-foot thick tire walls all the way around. We've got a essentially slab on grade floor. Whether it's earth or concrete, it's still built on the grade. And then we've got this mound of earth that's filling in the back. So what happens is, during the wintertime, this entire area here, this huge mass, heats up and stores the sun's energy like a big battery. So throughout the wintertime, when the sun goes down, and you could combine insulative shades at nighttime and other techniques to keep warm, but this energy that's stored during the day then releases back into the living area at night. And there's all different ways that you can tune this, but it's really a fabulous technique. And you can also see here that we've created this large area here for catchment for the water. Again, remember, these buildings are totally off the grid, so they don't have power, they don't have water lines. Some of them have actually propane tanks that they use as assist for either cooking stoves or assist for hot water, or maybe even a stove or a furnace or something like that. But other than that, they don't have any utilities in this area. So they catch their own water, they create their own heat, and they create their own electricity. And those solar panels also sit up here, which you can see was, if it's on the 60-degree angle, it's optimal for the wintertime. In the summertime, like I showed you just a second ago, you tilt those up and you get the optimum angle for the solar panels in the summer. But kind of in a nutshell, that is the Earthship system. Now with these upper walls here, what they'll do is actually the tire walls will continue. I showed you the interior. Sometimes the tire walls tear down, you know, as it goes downhill for the roof slope. And the earth actually berms way up here. And sometimes they will add insulation in here to create this retained heat area. But again, you've got your solar greenhouse on this side and your Earthship walls. Now sometimes they will bring the tires if you don't have the stability in the soil. Sometimes these tire walls will come all the way down. You won't have the earthen wall inside. In a nutshell, this is really your Earthship construction. So we talked about tires, rammed earth, compacted earth in these tires, creating these walls. They often have a bond beam up on top where they put their plate that runs around here, a wood plate which then attaches to the roof system. You have your big vigas that come across and support the roof. You have your solar foundation out here which attaches, and your entry door, which I showed you on the tour of the studio, would be in the side here. You have this massive earth wall behind the building, well insulated roof over the top, so you have huge energy mass. Compare a 3.5, 4-inch 2x4 wall to a 3-foot tire wall combined with 10 or 15 or 20 feet of solid earth encapsulating that, and it's a world of difference. So I'm curious if, after seeing a little bit about this, and we're going to get into the 6 pillars in a little bit more depth, talking about how they use waste products, how they create their own energy, how they collect their water, how they deal with wastewater, how they grow food, in the next webinar, which will also be about an hour and a half. So these will be posted as 2 webinars when we're finished. But I'm curious, after our exercise in the very beginning of the webinar, what your thoughts might be on conventional homes and how conventional homes work compared to how this radically different idea of the Earthship works, how this vessel that he's created, or likes to call his Earthship, how this vessel rides along in the environment compared to a quote-unquote standard home. Very interesting, and I think there is a lot that we can learn. So tonight we covered the intro on Earthships. We had the tour of the Greater World Earthship community. We had a construction overview of how to build Earthships with rammed tires. And next week, or actually I'm going to do it probably in the next couple of days here, we're going to discuss in detail the 6 pillars. I'll take you in more in depth into how they put these things together and how these 6 pillars come together to create the Earthships. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about what we can learn, how you might apply some of these things to your green building, and what your feelings might be about, maybe approaching your green building from a different point of view. I mean, does it have to be that craftsman house? And believe me, I toured architecture all over the globe, and I've been to the Gable house, which is sort of the coup d'etat, the creme de la creme of green and green architecture. Green and green are the actual architects who made famous the California craftsman style, and the Gable house was for the Gamble family, which was Procter & Gamble. So it was sort of like the way Michael Reynolds built a 10,000 square foot Earthship for Dennis Weaver. The green and green architects built this monster house for the Gambles, but it's a fascinating, beautiful, incredible piece of architecture. I love it. I love Victorians. I love Adobe buildings. I love Spanish architecture. I love it all. But if you want to address a building as a green building, as a building that works with the planet, with the environment, approaches the idea of net zero, in other words, not taking any outside energy or creating as much energy as you use, I think there are tons of things we can learn from the Earthship. And I'd like to take the Earthship concept and develop it into some sort of a model that we could build in California and other places where there are a lot of problems building Earthships because of building codes. And finally, we will talk about resources. I'll show you a lot of the books. Michael Reynolds has, I don't know, 15, 20 books he's written on all kinds of stuff. I'll talk to you a little bit about. I've bought almost all of them. I've read through a lot of them, scanned all the others. I'll tell you which books you should get if you want to follow up and learn more about his particular program and where you can get them, and some other resources about green building. So for tonight, or whenever you may be watching this webinar, thank you very much for joining us. Otis Bradley signing out.